I was shocked to witness the cleaning lady defend my daughter against prejudice. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. I stood there, heart racing, as my breath caught in my throat. The sounds around me faded into a hushed hush. The cafeteria was filled with kids, laughter ringing out, but there was also a dark undercurrent. A group of boys had cornered my daughter, Sarah. Their sneering faces, twisted in mockery, made my heart thud heavily in my chest. You see, Sarah wasn't like the others. With her wild curls and dark skin, she stood out amongst a sea of light features. And that day, they saw her as different. My mother always told me to stand tall, to ignore the bullies, but all I could feel was a lump in my throat. I wanted to yell, to rush over and scoop her into my arms, but my legs felt like lead. I felt helpless. Then, like an unexpected hero in a movie, the cleaning lady arrived. Mrs. Jenkins. So often overlooked, shuffling about her duties, head down, mopping floors and emptying trash with a tired sigh. But today, her eyes blazed with fiery defiance. She wiped her hands on her apron, and I could see the determination etched into her tired features. Her voice, usually soft, sliced through the tension in the air. Enough! She shouted, the word echoing through the cafeteria like a clap of thunder. Kids turned their heads, surprised. I could see the boys flinch, their bravado faltering for just a moment. I'd never heard her use that tone before. It sent a shiver down my spine. Leave her alone. She continued. What's wrong with you? Are you afraid of someone who's different? Her booming voice brought a fresh wave of silence, thick and heavy. It seeped into every corner of the room as the crowd absorbed this unexpected drama. The air felt electric. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. The boys exchanged nervous glances. It was a challenge they hadn't expected. They began to back away, the power shifting in that moment. My daughter's expression turned from fear to surprise, hope flickering in her eyes. This was the woman who was always cleaning up the messes of others. Little did we know she had the strength to confront prejudice standing tall before her, but then, just as quickly as it started, Mrs. Jenkins turned to look at me. Our gazes locked, and I felt the weight of unspoken words. There was something profound in her Aisha story buried deep, a hidden chapter one never knew existed. I could sense the collective gasp from the surrounding students. What else did this cleaning lady hold? The tension hung thick in the air, leaving a bitter taste on my tongue. My heart raced with questions. What had she seen? What had she endured? I felt a sudden urge to know more. Just then, the bell rang, jerking everyone back to reality. The moment shattered, leaving an echo of thoughts. The cafeteria erupted in noise, kids scrambling to escape the weight of what had just unfolded. I stood frozen for a beat longer, clutching the edge of the table, desperately wanting answers. Mrs. Jenkins glanced back at Sarah, a brief smile flickering on her lips, before disappearing down the hallway, her figure swallowed by silence. My heart raced with urgency. What secrets did she carry? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The following days felt endless. Each morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, fearing what awaited Sarah at school. There was an unspoken burden now, a heaviness that settled in the pit of my chest. It wasn't just about the bullying anymore, it was about understanding the world my daughter faced, one filled with challenges that felt insurmountable. I replayed Mrs. Jenkins' fierce defense in my mind over and over, finding solace in her bravery but also a surge of frustration. Who was she, really? What stories lingered behind those tired eyes? At home, Sarah was quieter than usual. I noticed the way she picked at her food, the way her laughter didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to protect her, to reassure her that she was okay, that she was perfect just as she was. But every time I opened my mouth, I found myself stumbling over my own words. "Mom, can we talk about Mrs. Jenkins?" Sarah finally spoke up one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. I paused, my heart leaping at the opportunity to connect. "Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to know?" I asked, leaning in, hoping to catch a glimpse of her thoughts. "That I think she's special," Sarah said, pulling her curls tighter around her fingers. "Like she knows a lot about being different." I nodded, the lump in my throat thickening. Here was my daughter, absorbing the moments that shaped her, drawing strength from the woman who had stepped in at a pivotal moment. "She is special," I affirmed, imagining what it must feel like to see someone like Mrs. Jenkins standing up for you and your values. "Do you want me to find a way to talk to her?" Sarah shrugged, her gaze dropping to her plate. "I just think she sees things we don't." That night, sleep eluded me as I lay awake in bed, pondering Sarah's words. Side by side, they revealed a truth I hadn't fully recognized. Mrs. Jenkins was different, she held a world within her, and there was a reason she had stepped up. Her existence was filled with wisdom earned through grit and the scars of life. I felt an overwhelming need to learn more, to bridge the chasm that had formed between us, the privileged and the overlooked. The following day, motivated by an unlikely courage, I approached the school with a determined heart. I had arranged to meet Mrs. Jenkins after hours, a small request only. She had agreed, albeit skeptically. As I entered the quiet hallway, the afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows, casting a warm glow on the walls. I found Mrs. Jenkins in the storage room, surrounded by cleaning supplies, her soft huffing the only noise amidst the silence. She looked up in surprise when I entered, wiping her hands on her apron once more, a ritual that seemed to ground her. "Mrs. Jenkins," I began, hesitating for a moment. "Thank you for what you did the other day. It meant the world to my daughter." She nodded, her expression inscrutable. "I just did what any decent person would." Her voice was steady, but I could sense a flicker of vulnerability underneath. "But it was more than that," I urged, stepping closer, heart pounding. "You stood up when others didn't. What made you do it?" The air between us thickened, her gaze turning distant as if she were revisiting a painful memory. "You see things in a different light when you've walked a path not many dare to. I know what it's like to be the one everyone overlooks." The truth of her words hung heavy in the air, and I felt an ache for the struggles she hinted at. "What's your story?" I found myself asking, desperate to understand her story that could teach us both. She hesitated, her eyes clouding over with contemplation. The silence stretched on, making me acutely aware of the weight of the world she carried. Just when I thought she would share, the door creaked open abruptly, and I turned to see Sarah standing there, wide-eyed. "Mom." She stepped inside, looking between us. I could see a flicker of recognition in her gaze when she looked at Mrs. Jenkins. "Sarah," I said, realizing too late that I had created an intimate moment without her knowledge. But Mrs. Jenkins surprised me. "Hey there, darling," she smiled warmly. Kneeling to be at Sarah's level. "What bring you here?" The hallway felt overshadowed by an impending sense of discovery, and I could see Sarah searching for answers I now longed for. It felt surreal, like everything was abruptly shifting. I reached for my daughter's hand, tightening my grip as I wondered if this doorway could reveal secrets that would either shatter or solidify our lives. Just then, a shrill ring pierced the air, my phone vibrating in my pocket. I glanced down at the screen and my breath caught in my throat. A text from the principal popped up. "We need to discuss a serious matter regarding Sarah." Panic twisted in my gut. As the room began to spin with confusion, I looked up at Mrs. Jenkins and saw recognition flicker in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the new storm brewing just outside our world. I felt Sarah squeeze my hand tighter, fear mingling with curiosity as we waited for the revelation that would inevitably change everything. The moment stretched into an eternity, every second heavy with the weight of unspoken words and impending revelations. Sarah looked between us, her innocence a delicate shield against the surge of dread that threatened to engulf me. I could see the questions swirling in her young mind, the innocent curiosity that would soon be met with a harsh reality. Mom. She finally broke the silence, her voice trembling just enough for me to notice. Is everything okay? I wanted to tell her that, yes, everything was fine, that it was just a trivial matter, or that I would sort out whatever it was that the principal wanted. But the anxiety in my chest spoke otherwise, an ominous reminder that the world didn't always conform to our wishes and assurances. Mrs. Jenkins, noticing the tension wrapping around us like a cold blanket, stood up and stepped closer, her presence both comforting and grounding. You know, Sarah, she began softly, it's all right to feel scared sometimes. But remember that you are not alone in this. The sincerity in her voice, steeped with raw vulnerability, caught me off guard. In that moment, I realized just how profoundly our lives were intertwined and how she had unknowingly become an anchor not only for Sarah but for me, too. I could feel a small flicker of hope worming its way through the chaos, but it quickly dimmed as I returned my focus to the looming notification on my phone. Mrs. Jenkins, thank you, but I need to. It's okay, Mom, Sarah interjected gently. I can handle this. Her eyes sparkled with an unyielding determination that momentarily swept away my own fears. I was taken aback by her resolve. Was this the same girl who had been laughing less, who had withdrawn into a shell? There was a fire ignited within her, a sense of agency that was both alarming and inspiring. As I turned the device over in my trembling hands, Mrs. Jenkins crouched down to Sarah's eye level again. You are stronger than you realize, little one. Always stand up for what you believe in, even when it's tough. The words seemed to take root in Sarah's heart, and I exhaled slowly, fighting the tumult within me. I'll be right back, I murmured, pulling Sarah into a brief embrace before stepping toward the door. Stay here with Mrs. Jenkins, okay? She nodded, her expression steadfast, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of what awaited me beyond those doors. As I rounded the corner, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, painting the empty hallway with harsh shadows. I approached the principal's office with hesitant footsteps, each step seemingly echoing the internal conflict raging within me. I pushed the door open slowly, the templates of normalcy within the walls clamoring to crush the fears rattling inside my chest. Ms. Collins, the principal greeted with an expression that seemed too grave for the casual setting. Please, have a seat. I obeyed, my stomach churning as I prepared for what I suspected would be a harsh conversation about my daughter. I had seen the glances from other parents at the school functions. There were whispers, I was sure of it. What's this about? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The principal steepled her fingers, her lips pressed together like a seam of a closed book. We've received reports about ongoing issues concerning Sarah. Allegations, to be precise. Her words stacked upon my anxiety, forming a towering wall. Allegations? I echoed, disbelief filling the spaces in my voice. She nodded. It seems not just the bullying, but whispers of other children feeling unsafe around her. My heart sank. Unsafe? Sarah? The words tasted bitter as they left my lips. She's the one being bullied, not the architect of anyone's fear. However, the principal continued, her tone surprisingly soft despite the gravity of her words. The nature of the claims requires us to take them very seriously, especially given the current climate in society. As she spoke, my mind raced through possible scenarios. Who would be bold enough to turn Sarah's struggle into a weapon? I saw flashes of faces of parents who might not understand, who fear differences. I felt my resolve harden, though a tightness threatened to choke me. Ms. Collins, I understand this is difficult to process, but if there are any truths behind the rumors. I interrupted, my voice rising, the heat of injustice coursing through me. This is not about truths, it's about fear and prejudice dressed up to look like warning signs. My daughter is struggling, and instead of offering support, you want to push her back because others can't cope with differences. Please, let's not escalate this further, she said, raising her hand in a placating gesture. We need to protect everyone involved, including by ostracizing my child. I shot back, hot with the realization of being cornered both by people I thought would help us and against the very society we live in. But just as I was about to unleash my full defense, a gentle knock at the door interrupted us. The principal glanced up, momentarily distracted. "Come in," she called, her constancy wavering as the door creaked open. To my shock, Mrs. Jenkins stood there, resolute and fierce. I felt a surge of warmth spread through my heart, a newfound respect for this woman fighting for Sarah. But the unexpected appearance of her left me wondering what was more at stake in this moment. As she stepped fully inside, her eyes met mine, and in them, I read a message of solidarity. I wasn't alone in this fight. The warmth was palpable, it surged through the room as if our shared determination meant more than the disagreements, more than the situation threatening to tear at the seams of our fragile lives. "May I speak?" Mrs. Jenkins asked, her voice steady but filled with a gravitas that demanded attention. The principal seemed taken aback by her presence, weighing the sudden shift in authority and expectations. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her features before she nodded. And at that moment, as I prepared for a battle I didn't know would ensue, my heart raced with both hope and worry. Would Sarah's story be supported, or would the fragility of understanding crack under the weight of prejudice once more? I clenched my hands into fists, sensing that this would either become the defining moment for Sarah or perhaps unravel any hope of safety we had fought so hard to reach. Behind me, I sensed Sarah's presence lingering outside, innocent yet vulnerable to a world that may not care about her truth. The door stood ajar, echoing whispers of possibility, but it also threatened to swallow us whole. Each heartbeat grew louder, a countdown to what might emerge next from the shadows. The tension in the room was palpable as Mrs. Jenkins straightened her posture, a flash of defiance shimmering in her eyes. "Thank you for allowing me to speak, Principal Harris," she began, her voice steady as if she were a lawyer defending an innocent client. "I've been personally observing the changes in Sarah's demeanor and the behaviors of her peers. It's crucial to consider the source of these allegations before jumping to conclusions." The principal opened her mouth to interject, but a firm glance from Mrs. Jenkins silenced her. I held my breath, my chest tightened with a mixture of hope and dread. Could Mrs. Jenkins truly shift the narrative, or would her efforts simply echo through the walls of bureaucracy? "Sarah is not a danger to anyone," Mrs. Jenkins continued, her voice rising slightly, emboldened by her passion. "What she's facing is a reaction of fear from those who don't understand her, and letting these allegations fester without investigation won't protect the other children either." However, the principal interjected, her measured tone laced with irritation, "The parental concerns are valid and must be addressed promptly. We cannot ignore the voices of the other parents. Valid concerns often stem from ignorance." Mrs. Jenkins' resolve quivered with a slight tremor, but her gaze remained unbroken. "It's time for us to educate these children about kindness, inclusion, and empathy instead of blaming Sarah for their preconceived notions. She deserves to have advocates, and we must stand up for her." As those words resonated through the room, a cautious hope began to weave its way through my despair. Here was a woman who saw the truth, who refused to bow down to the shadows of expectation. But would it be enough? The walls seemed to close in around us, and with each moment passing, the unwanted reality of our situation loomed heavier. "Perhaps we should conduct a meeting with the parents instead," the principal suggested reluctantly, as if my daughter's plight was merely a procedural inconvenience. "Open dialogue can sometimes lead to resolution." "Dialogue?" I scoffed, my fury re-emerging. "Do you really think open dialogue would change hearts that already harbor prejudice? We need action that supports our children, not permits unfounded fear to dictate their lives." A bead of sweat formed at the nape of my neck, the air in the room thick with unspoken words. My pulse raced in chaotic rhythm, torn between wanting to tear down the barriers that held us hostage and waiting anxiously to see how Mrs. Jenkins would craft the next move in this flawed game. "I agree," she replied, glancing at me with a silent reassurance as if we were in this together. "But instead of positioning Sarah as someone to fear, we should celebrate her strengths. Perhaps we could facilitate an assembly where her interests and talents are showcased, to humanize her experience to those who may feel threatened by her differences." The principal's brow furrowed, a flicker of defensiveness edging her features. Was she genuinely considering it? Or was she merely appeasing Mrs. Jenkins? I couldn't tell. My heart raced, racing against the clock as the clock on the wall ticked away, marking my dwindling courage. Ms. Collins, what are your thoughts? Principal Harris directed my attention back, her eyes boring into me with a mixture of expectation and condescension. In a flash of clarity, I realized I had to break through the murky waters myself. I think it's time that the school takes a stand against bullying, regardless of where it arises. We should not only defend our children but empower them to stand out boldly against adversity, I said, my voice steadying as the conviction swelled. Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement, and I felt a solidarity flowing between us, like an invisible thread binding our fates together against an invisible enemy. Then let's organize this assembly, she continued, her tone vibrant with possibility. Allow Sarah to share her story, allow her voice to be heard. I looked to the principal, my heart racing with anticipation. And the bullying should stop. We cannot allow misguided perceptions to propagate fear in an environment built for learning and growth. We need clear policies that protect every child's right to be themselves unconditionally. The principal's shoulders drooped slightly, uncertainty warring in her eyes. You'll have to think about this. There's protocol. Protocol will only serve to imprison Sarah further, I interjected, losing all semblance of decorum. We are her voice. We are her advocates. If you are unwilling to act, then I will seek other avenues for support. There are organizations, there are allies who will listen and stand with us. The air grew thick with the weight of my words, each one echoing within the room, filled with an intensity of unyielding determination. This is about far more than policy, it's about a child's emotional well-being and her right to thrive. And then came a knock at the door, echoing through the charged atmosphere. I turned, expecting another administrative figure, but instead, it was Sarah, her small frame silhouetted in the doorway. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and curious, but there was a flicker of sorrow etched in her brow, a child who sensed the echoes of adult conflicts swirling around her. Mom. She called out, the innocence in her voice igniting a swell of protective fury within me. The room fell quiet as everyone's gaze shifted to her. I could see the weight of the world spilling into her tiny heart, the confusion mixing with fear of being seen, fear of being wronged. Sarah, I said, rushing towards her, my arms wrapping around her in a hug that deepened the lines of resolve across my chest. Is everything okay? She asked again, her small voice quivering as she searched my eyes for the truth. In that moment, I realized that instead of shielding her, I had to show her the struggles of the world while arming her with strength and understanding. Not yet, baby. But we're working on it. You're not alone in this fight. We will figure it out together. Mrs. Jenkins stepped closer, offering a gentle smile to Sarah, who still stood in the doorway, tethered to the uncertainties of her existence. It's important to stand up for ourselves and others, Sarah, she said, kneeling beside her in an act of solidarity. You're stronger than you know. Just then, the principal cleared her throat, fumbling for control as Sarah peered around me, unsure but trusting. I believe we need to come together as a community, she began cautiously, and support Sarah and all our students facing challenges, but my heart sank as I caught sight of hesitation in Principal Harris' eyes as her grip around the notion of true support seemed tenuous, fragile at best. Would she grasp this opportunity for real change? Or would we leave this meeting haunted by the specter of discrimination, watching as it festers beneath the surface? As Sarah's hand slipped into mine, warmth surged through me, but the uncertainty of our journey ahead loomed like dark clouds on the horizon, forcing me to confront the possibility that not everyone would stand with us the way Mrs. Jenkins had. A gust of wind howled outside, a visceral reminder that storms were brewing and that peace was yet to be claimed. My heart raced as I recognized the weight of the battle. We were standing on the brink of phone that could either tear us apart or bring us closer than ever before. Let's fight, I whispered to myself, squeezing Sarah's hand as I turned back to face whatever choice lay ahead. The echoes of my heart thundered through the quiet, amplifying my resolve. For Sarah. For all of us. The next day dawned with a sense of anxious anticipation. Sarah clung to my side as we walked to school, her grip a mixture of fear and hope. I could feel her little heart racing, thrumming against my hip, each step toward the school an exercise in fortitude. The air was heavy with uncertainty, nobody knew how the previous day's meeting had shifted the tide in our small community. As we approached the school entrance, the murmurs of gossip and side glances greeted us. A couple of parents stood at the gates, arms folded, their expressions closed off like an invisible wall. One of them, Mrs. Carter, caught my eye and quickly averted her gaze, her attitude radiating judgment like a cold fog. I'd seen that look before, the kind that twisted knots in my stomach. "Mom, why are they looking at us like that?" Sarah's voice was small, barely above a whisper, but it tugged painfully at my heart. The innocence of her question struck me like a blow. "Because they don't understand yet, sweetheart," I replied, crouching down to meet her gaze. "But we will keep trying to help them see you for who you truly are." To my surprise, she nodded, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She was braver than I realized, taking each step into that hostile environment with a quiet strength that mirrored my own resolve. But courage doesn't erase fear, it just makes you walk through it, step by agonizing step. As we hurried down the corridor, the familiar cacophony of school life enveloped us. Children squealed with laughter, and teachers called for attention over the energetic chatter. Yet, shadows loomed over those moments, thickening the air. I spotted Mrs. Jenkins huddled with some staff members, her animated gestures a stark contrast to the tight-lipped expressions of those surrounding her. "Are we ready?" I asked softly, my heart racing at the prospect of the assembly scheduled for later that day. It felt monumental, a potential turning point, but what if it fell flat? "I believe so," she replied, her eyes sparkling with determination. "But we must also prepare for pushback. Remember, change doesn't come easily." I sighed, the gravity of her words amplifying the knot of anxiety within me. What if those who feared differences were more entrenched in their beliefs than we could ever hope to reach? The realization was daunting, crushing even. But amidst the darkness, there were glimmers of hope. As the lunch bell rang and students filed into the cafeteria, I noticed several children looking at Sarah with curiosity instead of apprehension. A small group approached her timidly, the sweetest among them, a girl named Lucy, who had shared crayons with Sarah in kindergarten. "Hey, Sarah." Lucy chirped, a hesitant smile gracing her lips. "Do you want to sit with us?" My heart swelled as Sarah's face broke into a delighted grin, a beautiful transformation that illuminated her features. Perhaps this day would be a turning point after all. Perhaps it was beginning to shift, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the night that I'd loved to. She exclaimed, and as they walked toward the table, I felt an unexpected wave of relief wash over me for both her and for myself. Perhaps in the face of conflict, moments of kindness could seep in. As I stood watching from a distance, I became aware of someone hovering at my side. I turned to find Samantha, the cleaning lady, her hands clasped nervously. "Hey, I just wanted to share something," she said, her voice soft but earnest. "What is it?" I asked, surprised. Samantha was usually an observer, a quiet presence who went about her work without drawing attention. "I saw what happened yesterday," she began, her gaze earnest and piercing. "I know how hard it is for kids like Sarah. My sister has a daughter, she's different too. Just know, I'm on your side. I'd like to help however I can." Just as her words began to sink in, the lunchroom erupted into chaos. A boy at the back of the cafeteria shouted something, laughter erupting like a clap of thunder. "Look at the freak." His voice rang through the chatter, and the laughter that followed cut through the atmosphere like a jagged knife. My heart stuttered in horror as I turned to Sarah, whose face fell, confusion flashing across her features. "Mom?" she asked, clutching her lunchbox tightly. Before I could respond, Samantha stepped forward, her posture straightening. "That is not okay," she yelled, her voice powerful and shocked. "You don't get to speak like that. What you are doing is wrong." Gasps echoed around the cafeteria, and I felt my chest swell with a mixture of pride and disbelief. This quiet woman had stood unswervingly, her soul laid bare in defense of my daughter. "Who do you think you are?" the boy shouted back, the bravado dripping from his voice. It was a challenge, a confrontation that sowed seeds of fear within the hearts of many. But Samantha didn't falter. Instead, she continued. I'm someone who knows that hearts can change when they're faced with love and acceptance. And if you can't respect each other, you're only going to hurt yourselves. As her words rang loud and true, a ripple of tension shifted through the room. Silence fell over the children, some wide-eyed with surprise as they absorbed the truth of her statement. I felt a swell inside me, a glimpse of hope rising from the ashes of conflict, but as the tension thickened, I suddenly noticed Mrs. Jenkins rushing toward us with a concerned look, her brows furrowed deeply. Her presence was commanding as she offered a bold reminder to the room. This is precisely why we're having the assembly, children. Every voice here matters, and you all have a role in shaping a more inclusive community. The choir of whispers began to swell again, but the energy was different now, charged with the spark of hope ignited by Samantha's words. Yet, I felt the weight of uncertainty creeping back, wondering what battles lay ahead, how much more courage we would need, and whether that courage could withstand the ridicule and resistance that surely followed. As Sarah steadied herself, I looked down at her little hand intertwined with Samantha's bigger one, two different worlds colliding in an unexpected act of kindness. Would it be enough to shield her against the harsh realities of the world outside? In that moment, the storm began to brew further in my heart, a mixture of vulnerability and resilience. I wondered how many more depths we would face, how many more cleaning ladies would step up, and whether I could bear the weight of this journey with my daughter. As the assembly time approached, I could feel every heartbeat, every breath thick with anticipation. What would happen next? Would this fight bear fruit or become another reminder of our many struggles? But if there was one thing I knew, it was that we were no longer alone. The echoes of Sarah's journey rippled through the hearts of people in that room, a collective veneration urging change. And as I looked at Samantha, catching her eyes for a brief moment of solidarity, I realized we were standing on the brink of something monumental. The question was, were we ready to embrace it? The assembly hall was packed with students, their chatter blending into an anxious hum that echoed against the high ceiling. I sat nervously in the row of adult seats, squinting to catch glimpses of Sarah among her peers. Clusters of children shifted around, swapping whispers and playful nudges, but they seemed unaware of the tension that simmered beneath the cheerful facade. Samantha had brought a spark of courage, but as every pair of eyes settled, it felt like that light flickered on the edge of darkness. The principal, Mr. Thompson, stood at the podium, his voice steady yet laced with an undertone of urgency. This assembly marks an important moment for our school, he began, scanning over the crowd, a chance for us to learn, to grow, and to stand together against division. Murmurs of assent rippled through the crowd, but I could sense that some students were less than willing to engage. The boy who had mocked Sarah earlier, his name was Kyle, sat at the back with a small contingent of friends, their expressions hardened by skepticism. As Mr. Thompson introduced the topic of inclusivity, the air grew thick with expectation. Was this really going to change anything? My heart sank at the thought of it all becoming just words, empty promises that would dissipate once the assembly closed. Then, without warning, another child stood up, Anna, a bright spark known for her vibrant artwork, her hair a cascade of red. I think it's really important that we all listen, she said, her voice tiny but firm. I used to ignore the kids who were different. She paused, taking a moment to collect herself as all eyes turned to her. But that only made it worse. I know Sarah, and she's one of the kindest people I know. The words hung in the air, and I watched as Kyle rolled his eyes, sneering at the entire concept. Yet, Anna's confidence broke through the barrier of indifference that hung between them. If we care about our school and each other, we need to change how we talk about people who are different. The wavering flicker of hope sparked in my chest again. Was it spreading? Were others beginning to see the value in embracing differences? I stole a glance at Sarah, who had begun to bounce in her seat, a flicker of excitement dancing across her face. Just then, Mr. Thompson called for the audience to reflect. I want each of you to think about one positive thing you can say about your classmates, he encouraged, his tone gentle yet unwavering. No one should feel excluded. At first, silence settled as though each student carried the weight of their own hesitation, but soon it filled with hesitant voices. One by one, things began to change. I heard names being spoken with kindness, a few even whispering Sarah's name in reverent tones. But as quickly as that kindness began to flow, the air thickened again. Kyle's voice cut through the murmur. "Yeah, right, like this is going to solve anything. You all think you're being nice, but are you really just pretending? It's all fake." A ripple of unease flowed through the crowd, and I felt Sarah's grip on my hand tighten. Panic welled within me like a tidal wave. Would his words drown out the seeds of hope that had so tenderly begun to sprout? Before I could soothe Sarah, Samantha rose from her seat. She took a deep breath, the expression on her face resolute. "Kyle, I get where you're coming from," she said, her voice carrying an undercurrent of empathy. "But you're wrong about one thing, it's not about pretending. It's about learning to accept each other, even when it's challenging." Challenging. The word hung between us like an unyielding wall. Kyle's face shifted, uncertainty flashing behind his bravado, but it was fleeting. "You don't even know me," he shot back, defensiveness cropping up like a shield. "You're right," Samantha acknowledged. "I don't know you. But I know what it's like to feel alone and judged. And I don't want that for anyone, especially kids like Sarah." Another wave of murmurs washed over the audience, but now some of them were in agreement. I could see nods, hear whispers of "she's right," and "me too." The shift was palpable, the air thickened with rising tension and possibility. Then, just as Kyle opened his mouth again, a shot rang out from nowhere. A student from the back suddenly stood, shaking with raw emotion. "What about those of us who don't fit in anywhere?" It was Lucas, often overlooked, known for his quirky style and deep love for science fiction. "You just see Sarah differently, but we all feel different in our own ways. If we don't stand together now, we're making our differences a liability." The courage pouring from him was magnetic. It drew the focus of the room, shifting the narrative. The collective vulnerability resonated, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences. I could see students leaning toward one another, creating a bridge formed by honesty and camaraderie. As the assembly drew closer to a close, I breathed in the mixture of hope and anxiety. My heart knew that promises made in assemblies could easily be broken, yet I clung to the notion that perhaps we were starting to create a community where kindness had a stronger hold, a community willing to confront the difficult moments. But as the bell rang, signaling the end, and the students began to file out, my heart sank as I saw Kyle slip out the door, his expression laden with a scowl. But beneath that scowl was something darker and more foreboding, a glance back, as though plotting revenge. As I looked down at Sarah, eager to hear her thoughts, the weight of impending dread washed over me. "Mom, can we keep doing this every day?" she asked, her eyes alight with pages yet to be written. "Of course, sweetie," I replied, though the knot of anxiety twisted tighter. But deep down, I felt the current of uncertainty pulling me as I realized, what if Kyle and his friends decided to retaliate? What if their laughter transformed from amusement to cruelty? The ride home was quiet, my mind racing with possibilities and dark imaginings. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of either something transformative or something profoundly devastating. The battle for acceptance had just begun, and as the car turned down the familiar streets, I could taste both hope and fear mingling on my tongue. What awaited us when we returned to school tomorrow? Would we be able to withstand the storm that was brewing, or would the flares of hope extinguish under the cold weight of disdain? The next morning, I could barely mask the tension coiling in my stomach as I drove Sarah to school. The sun had risen bright, washing the streets in golden light, but it did little to alleviate the heaviness pressing down on my chest. Each block felt like a countdown to an uncertain fate, and as we parked in front of the school, I held my breath, steeling myself for whatever followed. "Remember, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile as I glanced at Sarah's bright, freckled face. "Just be yourself. You've got this." She nodded, though her smile wavered. We stepped out, and I watched her dart toward the entrance, her ponytail swaying with a childlike determination. But my heart sank again with each step. Would the bravery shown the day before still hold? The day dragged on, each second infused with dread and anticipation. I found myself pacing the living room, unable to concentrate on any task. I glanced at my phone, waiting for messages from Sarah's friends, wondering if the tides had shifted overnight. Resentment towards Kyle and his friends churned inside me like an angry sea, fueled by the protective instinct coursing through my veins. Finally, the phone rang, snapping me out of my spiral. It was a text from Samantha. Things are tense. Kyle's been spreading rumors. He's scared the other kids might back him up. My heart sank further at the thought. Memories of my own school days flashed before me: mockery, isolation, a helpless longing for connection, things I never wanted Sarah to experience. As the clock edged closer to dismissal, I summoned what little courage I had left. I rushed to the school, determined to intervene if necessary, prepared to shield Sarah from the storm I feared would engulf her. When I arrived, the halls hummed with voices, but a strange hush fell as I rounded a corner. That's when I saw Sarah, her head bent, the color drained from her face. Surrounding her were Kyle and his friends, their laughter harsh and piercing like shards of ice. What? You think we need more of your kind in our class? Kyle sneered, his expression twisted with disdain, eyes glinting like knives. Before I could act, a figure stepped in front of Kylie, woman I had never fully noticed in all my years of drop-offs and pickups. It was Mrs. Ramirez, the cleaning lady, with her gray hair tied back and a broom held like a shield. She stood her ground. You leave her alone. You don't have any idea how hard it is for these kids to show up every day, to be brave in a world that doesn't always accept them, she said, her voice unwavering, eyes fierce against the backdrop of adolescent cruelty. The students turned, caught off guard by her presence. You should mind your own business, lady, one of Kyle's friends muttered, but Mrs. Ramirez didn't waver. I have every right to stand up for what's right, she said, her voice rich with conviction. You think you're powerful because you have a group. You don't realize that true strength comes from kindness and respect. They may be different, but they're not less. Suddenly, her words struck a chord within me, simple, honest, and full of fierce advocacy. As the moment hung suspended in the air, I felt a ripple of emotion wash over me. Sarah's eyes brightened, a flicker of gratitude shining through her fear. It galvanized my own resolve. I stepped forward, joining Mrs. Ramirez, my heart pounding in solidarity. Exactly, I added, feeling the warmth of connection spread through my chest. No one should ever feel unwelcome or belittled. Sarah deserves to feel safe and accepted here. I locked eyes with Kyle, an unspoken challenge hanging between us. At that moment, an unexpected thing happened. Some students who had been nearby began inching closer, intrigued by this sudden confrontation. I could see confusion clouding Kyle's face, his bravado cracking under the weight of an unexpected audience. But just as I thought this might lead toward a breakthrough, the bell rang, slicing through the tension like a knife. The ambient noise grew louder as kids began to flow out of classrooms, and with it, the crowd that had stood witness began to disperse. Kyle's expression hardened once more as he looked at Sarah, his disdain flickering, before he muttered a cold, barely concealed threat. You'll regret this. Before I could respond, he shoved past me, dispersing like shadows into the crowd, but the lingering threats of hostility hung in the air like a storm cloud. Mrs. Ramirez remained beside me, her eyes piercing as she turned back towards Sarah, concern etched into her features. Are you all right, honey? She asked gently. Why, yeah, Sarah whispered, but her eyes betrayed a well of uncertainty I knew all too well. Let's talk, okay? I suggested, desperate to help her navigate this emotional labyrinth. With Mrs. Ramirez's protective presence, we found a quiet corner by the art room, where I could finally have the moment to check in with Sarah. But as I began to speak, a scream echoed through the halls, a sound so sharp and jarring, it silenced everything and everyone. My heart stumbled in dread as I turned, eyes wide as fear gripped me like icy fingers. Suddenly, a flurry of frantic whispers erupted, students pointing toward the entrance. Someone had run through the doors, a figure clad in black who continued forward, carrying something that glinted ominously in the light. The atmosphere shifted into chaos as screams erupted, and I felt my heart plummet further. Stay close. I shouted at Sarah, instinctively pulling her behind me as I shielded her. But within that instant, I realized we were standing at the forefront of something way beyond mere words of inclusivity. This was the brutal unveiling of a reality I had hoped we could avoid. What came next, what consequences would unfold, would demand all our courage and resilience, pitting hope against fear in the starkest way yet. The chaos that erupted in the school was a ghastly rhythm, a symphony of panic that cut deep into my heart. In that moment, time stretched and twisted, transforming the familiar hallways into a nightmarish landscape. I could barely process what was happening. The jarring contrast of Mrs. Ramirez's bravery and the sudden terror felt overwhelming. As I heard the first cries of students running away, adrenaline surged through my veins. I wrapped my arms protectively around Sarah, pulling her close, feeling her body tremble against me. The figure moved with a purpose, but the glint of whatever they carried pierced my vision. I couldn't discern intentions, but every instinct told me to react. My heart ached for the safety I had always tried to provide, a sanctuary that felt shattered at that moment. Keep moving, Sarah. We need to find a way out. I urged, scanning the room filled with confusion and fear. Panic coursed through the crowd, but my focus remained locked on my daughter. We inched backward, trying to slip away from the line of fire. Just then, a voice rang out, barely audible amid the clamoring chaos. Get down. It was Mrs. Ramirez again, her voice striking like a beacon in the swirling tempest. She sprang into action, ushering students away from danger with a fierce determination. I saw the way she put herself between the students and the threat, her broom raised like a sword, an ordinary guardian of youth about to face the unimaginable. It struck me in that moment her courage mirrored the kind of love I had tried to cultivate for Sarah. Mrs. Ramirez had become an anchor, and it was terrifying to realize what that might mean for all of us moving forward. As the tension mounted, a loud crash erupted from the entrance, sending a shockwave throughout the crowd. Eyes darted in every direction, fear mingling with confusion. I felt my breath quicken. Why was this happening? I had come to the school hoping to shield Sarah from the cruelty of childhood, yet here we stood, facing something far worse. Suddenly, a student screamed again. Run! It's a before they could finish, panic ignited in the fleeing crowd, a living, breathing entity of unchecked fear. I instinctively grabbed Sarah's hand tightly, urging her to run while my mind raced with 1,000 unspoken fears. Just as we turned to make our escape, the figure at the entrance froze under the fluorescent lights flooding the hall. In that brief moment of stillness, the chaos quieted, suffocated by a fragile suspicion. Behind the mask of fear, I could make out the familiar facade was Ethan, a classmate known for his art skills, known for his kindness. What was he doing? And then, the glint in his hand shifted into something I couldn't comprehend, an aluminum sculpture, crafted meticulously over the weeks, but in this moment, it could be mistaken for a weapon. My heart sunk deeper. But as our eyes locked amidst the chaos, I recognized the raw vulnerability in his face, the fear and desperation that mirrored my own that I just wanted to show everyone. Ethan called out, his voice trembling, cracking under the pressure of emotion. I thought if I brought this in, people would see what we can do together. Together. The word hung in the air like an unfulfilled promise. My heart twisted painfully as I saw the love and creativity in Ethan clash with the raw fear surrounding him. The students saw only the potential for violence painted red across a canvas of misunderstanding. Stop. Please put it down. I yelled, feeling a mixture of sympathy and urgency. I didn't know if he could hear me over the din, but I had to try. It's okay. Everyone just needs to take a breath. We can figure this out. But the roar of panic returned, drowning out my voice, and I watched helplessly as hands gripped phones to record rather than help. The waves of fear drowned out real compassion, carving fissures where understanding could have been. Why did this have to happen? In that moment, Sarah squeezed my hand tightly, her wide eyes glistening with tears, fear not only for herself but for everyone around her. I knelt beside her, desperate to shield her from this nightmare unfolding before us. We're going to be okay, I whispered, though every bit of my being felt the fracture in that statement. And then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed Mrs. Ramirez stepping forward, slowly but resolutely. There was a new kind of determination on her face, an unwavering courage defined not merely by the moment but by years of small acts of kindness unrecorded. "Ethan," she called softly, clearing her throat. "Listen to me. We know you're not here to hurt anyone, but the fear in this room is real." The words hung in the air, and I sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a fragile thread of connection attempting to mend the broken pieces. I looked at Sarah, who suddenly seemed frozen in thought. I held my breath as I turned back to the boy in front of us. His shoulders slumped, the tension draining from his body as he began to process Mrs. Ramirez's calming presence. "Can you put it down, Ethan?" I said, my heart racing with hope amidst the chaos. "Can we talk about it? Share what you created in a way that can bring us together instead of tearing us apart." But just as he looked down at the sculpture as if considering her offer, a loud shout jolted the air. Someone else had sprung forward, misunderstanding escalating once again. "Get away from him!" The scream sliced through the momentary lull like a blade, and as I turned to see who had shouted, an unmistakable realization crashed into me. It was Kyle, his face twisted with rage, but more than that, there was something else in his eyes, something deeper. In the maelstrom of confusion, as despair threatened to consume me whole, I understood with gut-wrenching clarity that every choice we made from here on would ripple through the lives of the kids around us. We stood at the brink of a painful reality, no longer merely facing prejudice or childhood bullying, but something more profound, something that needed healing. That I was desperate to protect my daughter, I was desperate for kindness to prevail. Yet as the circling mindless panic continued, it became chillingly clear that nothing would resolve without breaking through these walls. But just when I thought hope might flicker, I heard Sarah whisper, "Mom, what if?" She paused, her voice trembling with the weight of unasked questions. I looked into her eyes, the ones that reflected every shade of courage and fear, and in that fleeting moment, reality shifted beneath our feet. What if, indeed? The tension in the air hung like a thick fog, stifling every breath, every potential moment of clarity. My heart raced as I tried to navigate the whirlwind of emotions swirling around us, me thoughts a jumbled mess of fear for Sarah and a desperate hope for understanding. Just when I thought the world had grown dark beyond measure, my daughter's words cut through the chaos, igniting a flicker of possibility. "Mom, what if we can talk to them? What if we can help Ethan?" Sarah's voice, fragile yet resolute, soared over the cacophony, a gentle plea for salvation amidst the tumult. In her innocent wisdom, she offered a glimmer of light in the dark turmoil of fear and anger. I realized then that this was not just a moment for survival, it was an opportunity to foster connection, to transform misunderstanding into healing. But how could we, when the spiral of chaos seemed to eclipse reason itself? "Ethan, we can help you," I shouted, my voice cracking slightly as I looked to the boy frozen in fear. "Just put the sculpture down, please. We're here for you." For a heartbeat, time elongated as his eyes flickered between the chaos and the gentle encouragement offered by Sarah and Mrs. Ramirez. I felt a wave of vulnerability crash over me, unsure if our fragile attempt could withstand the magnitude of fear surrounding us. From the other side of the room, Kyle continued to shout, red-fisted and wild-eyed, a tragic figure entwined in his own rage. "You're all just scared. He's going to hurt someone." It was a raw, unfiltered instinct, one that seemed to echo through the subconscious of every student in that hallway. In that moment of turmoil, Mrs. Ramirez stepped boldly forward, her broom now resting against her side. "Kyle, this isn't the answer. Fear only breeds more fear." She looked directly into his eyes, and despite the protest that erupted around her, her steady gaze demanded a moment of introspection. "Can you remember a time when someone showed you kindness? Maybe even when they helped you understand?" The silence that followed was deafening, a striking contrast to the chaos. My heart surged with newfound hope. Was it possible to break the barrier of misunderstanding with just a memory of connection? I turned to Sarah, who was watching intently, and I felt the warmth of her small hand clasping mine, anchoring me. "Kyle," faltered, uncertainty marring his anger. I seized that flicker of vulnerability, leaning into the tumultuous environment. What if we all tried to share our true intentions instead of jumping to conclusions? I implored, my voice quavering with emotion. We can change this story together. The stillness began to morph. Some students shifted uneasily, while others exchanged glances laden with confusion. Ethan's gaze fell to the ground, the gravity of the moment pressing against his heart. While fear had held the crowd captive, there lingered a deafening yearning for resolution, for recognition of one another's humanity. There are so many ways we can express ourselves, I continued, letting my heart guide my words. Art, stories, even small acts of kindness, they can bring us together instead of tearing us apart. Sometimes, we just need to breathe, Mrs. Ramirez chimed in, her voice steady against the rising waves of tension. Let's take a pause to listen, to understand that if on cue, a few brave souls stepped forward. Maybe we can share what we're feeling. One girl suggested timidly, glancing at Ethan, who looked so fragile beneath the weight of it all. Ethan's shoulders began to relax, though doubt still clouded his expression. I didn't mean to scare anyone, he murmured, the anger dissipating from his brow, replaced by a desperation to connect. I just wanted to show what we can create together. But everyone was frightened. That I felt a warmth rising within me, fighting fiercely against the chill of fear that had gripped my heart. You're so talented, Ethan, and this school is a place for creativity, for collaboration. We can rediscover those things together. Just as hope began to take root amidst the chaos, a piercing shriek sliced through the air. No. Don't listen to them. It was Kyle again, his voice painted with desperation. They'll use your kindness against you. The rawness of his fear unveiled a different side of rage, one born from isolation, helplessness, and deep-seated hurt. The walls separating him from empathy started to crack, and I could see it. Kyle's face was marred with panic, the shadows of his own struggles playing out behind his defiant stance. Then let us help each other. I shouted, my heart racing anew. Let's break that pattern and show that kindness can triumph over fear. This rallying call caused ripples through the crowd. Some students murmured encouragement, while others exchanged cautious glances, beginning to question their own positions in this unfolding story. Just then, out from the corner of the room, a soft voice emerged. It's okay to be afraid, Kyle. You don't have to stand alone, it said. It was Sam, another student known for his gentle approach, stepping forward despite cowering under the weight of uncertainty. For the first time, I was struck by an unexpected kindness in the midst of turmoil, a small beam of light breaking the darkness. Perhaps this chaotic moment was not just a threat but a catalyst for something more significant, a chance for us to come together, to learn, to heal like a family. As we navigated through this visceral transformation, the ground underneath our feet shifted, trembling with uncertainty and promise. I glanced at Sarah, whose eyes shone with the possibility of Chanhaya devotion to piecing together what had almost been shattered. But in that moment of hope, a figure stepped from the shadows, someone whose presence gripped my heart with escalating dread. It was the school principal, a stoic expression etched into their features. What's happening here? They commanded, their tone sharp enough to slice through the atmosphere of tentative understanding we'd only just begun to nurture, and in an instant, the fear that had begun to ebb surged back to life, ready to take hold of the very fates we desperately sought to reshape. The air grew thick with apprehension as the principal entered the room, their authority casting a dark shadow over the fragile hope that had just begun to bloom. Enough of this chaos. They barked, eyes scanning the gathering crowd with disapproval, as if we were children in need of reprimanding rather than individuals searching for understanding. The moment was suffocating, threatening to unravel everything we had worked to build. In that instant, my heart raced, and I felt Sarah clutching my hand tighter, the warmth of her small fingers grounding me, the combination of her fear and faith igniting a protective flame within me. This isn't chaos. I found myself shouting defiantly, my voice rising above the din of confusion. This is an opportunity, a chance to connect, to bridge the divide that's been built up by ignorance and fear. The principal's demeanor shifted, their eyebrows furrowing deeper into a frown. This is not the time or place for this kind of discussion, they countered, a steely edge lacing their voice. We need to maintain order and safety. But beneath their words, I could hear the echoes of doubt, the unspoken acknowledgement that they did not possess all the answers, that the very protocols designed to protect might also imprison us. Then, something shifted inside me, a memory of all the moments I had spent worrying, of the countless times I had held my tongue when I should have spoken up. No longer. Order and safety come from understanding and compassion, I asserted, stepping forward, my voice steady despite the tempest rising inside me. You see chaos here because chaos has been allowed to grow unchecked. It festers when voices like Ethan's like Saracer silenced. A murmur rippled through the students, and in that moment, I locked eyes with Kyle, whose defiance faltered, replaced by a flicker of vulnerability. The principal was visibly taken aback, uncertainty flickering across their features for the first time. You're saying that we should just let kids run wild? That we should entertain these behaviors? They countered, but the conviction in my heart fueled my resolve. No. We must create a space where both their fears and their voices matter. I gestured toward Ethan at the center of it all, who stood trembling, the sculpture still clutched in his hands. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. This was his way of seeking connect. A desperate plea for understanding, much like so many others in this room, and then, as if the universe conspired to support our plea, Mrs. Ramirez stepped forward again, her gaze unyielding yet compassionate. This could be a turning point, she said softly, addressing the principal's wavering confidence. You have the ability to guide these students toward a powerful lesson about compassion, understanding, and inclusion. Wouldn't that be a far more enriching experience than merely keeping silence enforced by fear? A palpable tension filled the room. I could feel the invisible thread of solidarity weaving us closer together, students, staff, and parents alike. It was in this moment I realized the barrier we now faced wasn't just from the outside but from within, a system ingrained with fear and conditioned to respond with authority alone rather than empathy. My heart raced as I turned to my daughter and nodded at her. Let's show them what kindness looks like. Let's guide them toward acceptance. We all have parts of ourselves we hide in fear. I refuse to let ignorance drown the light in Sarah or in any of us. I could see the swelling courage reflected in not only the eyes of Sarah but of those surrounding us, those tentatively gathering strength from our truth. Principles are often held to standards, commanding authority, but here we stood, a diverse tapestry of young souls willing to reshape the narrative together. Maybe, I continued, the certainty in my voice buoying me against the uncertainty weighing down on us. Just maybe, if you allowed us the chance to hold an open dialogue, we could create something far more valuable than rules. We could forge connections. We can be guides for understanding. Ethan, still nestled in the chaos, took a step forward, the aluminum sculpture shifting in his hold. I don't want it to represent fear, he stammered, eyes darting from person to person, their weight of expectation stifling him. I want it to symbolize friendship and art and togetherness. His voice built momentum as he spoke, the charged air nurturing his spark. Suddenly, I found my momentum matching his, bolstered by the beauty of his vulnerable tenacity. Mirrored understanding began to ripple through the assembly as hands shot up, kids willing to stand beside Ethan, Sarah, and me, ready to craft a new beginning we could all be a part of. Can we have a project where we redefine what it means to be different? A girl to my left stood, voice wavering yet filled with sincere intent. We could share what we've created with all the students from art to stories. Another followed, I can help organize it. And then another, and amidst that surge of empathy, the tides began to shift within the principal too. I watched their posture, the softness settling in their expression, the gradual cooling of their previous indignation. If we can find ways to communicate and clarify intentions without settling into defensiveness, they said slowly, collecting their thoughts, then I see the potential in what you're all suggesting. That it was a breath of relief that floated through the room as I felt the chains of misunderstanding begin to rattle, shaking loose the constraints that had held us captive for far too long. Kyle stood in the back, confusion etched on his face, yet something shifted in his demeanor, a flicker of recognition as he saw his peers rallying toward connection rather than separation. Perhaps had been waiting for a way to change the narrative, to a chance to redefine his role. Looking at my daughter, I saw the spark in her eyes where fear once dwelled. Mom, I want to help, she whispered, stepping forward, a tiny meteor set to light a path through the darkest night. We can all help each other understand better. Tears trickled down my cheeks as I witnessed not just Sarah's courage but the collective courage of all kids present. Witnessing this moment of convergence laid bare my heart, reminding me that change begins with the belief in connection and oath to acceptance that can cascade through generations. The principle's expression shifted, no longer a protector shielding us from the turmoil but a facilitator guiding healing. Let's support this assembly together. Well, plan it right, and just like that, I felt the weight of 1,000 storm clouds begin to dissipate, the sweet smell of rain-soaked earth mixing with blossoms of change. We had bridged what felt insurmountable. Together, we were reclaiming our narrative. As the assembly ended and the students walked, I held Sarah's hand tight, her fingers intertwining with mine. Mom, can we make our own voices heard? What will your art be? I paused, letting her tapestry of dreams blend with mine, allowing a moment where simple words could transform into a deep river of creativity, mixing our fears yet again into understanding and rebirth. And somewhere, lost in the joyous chaos of creation, I realized the world had finally tilted on its axis. Within the dance of our newfound courage, I understood that life itself would always hold elements of unpredictability, heaviness, and often worry, but through moments of connection like this, there could forever live the power of hope. As I held Sarah near, a deep breath fluttered within me, revealing the strength forever entwined between us, her spirit of determination bearing witness to the fact that kindness could emerge from even the most harrowing storms. Together, we can be the change, I assured her, my heartbeat thrumming a rhythm of possibility. And in that moment, surrounded by support, vulnerability, and healing, the words I longed to say poured forth, a promise carried through the love I felt within the silence that enveloped us, a night both dark and filled with stars. Let's create a world where kindness reigns, where fear no longer chains, but liberates the spirit of understanding for generations to come.